Welcome to another episode of the Alley Report, part of the Service Department. Today, we're talking with DeBoard, author of A Year Spent in Horror and the upcoming Drowning in the Drink. Thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elford. This is the big leads. This is the Alley Report. So I feel very honored because you've had a lot of fantastic writers on already.
Well,
What
thanks.
you had Catherine Silva on like last week or 2 weeks ago or something like that. Your first one was Robert Atone, which that's a fairly big get for your first episode of a show. So
Yeah, I'm just
like
yeah. Anybody wants to talk to me, I'm always surprised.
it's great. You have a wide variety that come on here too. So I feel very honored to be on.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to get to talk to you. And I got to read an arc of Drowning in the Drink, which comes out. What's the release date for that one?
July 23rd. So
Okay, so
very
just
soon.
around the corner.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that
depending
was
on
a
when this gets put out. So
yeah, usually pretty quick. But yeah, that one was great.
oh, thank you.
And the way, it talks about like it's a horror story, but there's also, it's a story about addiction and things like that. But I don't know, it does it in a way that has a lot of empathy that sometimes you don't see in horror for people that, struggle. And I don't know, I thought that
Yeah,
was really great. I don't want to give too much away about it, but I
right.
really
Yeah, no,
like
and
that
I
aspect.
mean, I certainly have empathy for people with addiction because, I've dealt with a lot of people in my life who have unfortunately had to deal with that, and just seeing that it's always such a bummer. And it's weird because you're right, there are a lot of horror like movies or books that just don't really have empathy for drug addicts and stuff. They kind of use them as like throwaway characters and then just toss them aside. And it's like, come on. So I wanted to give a little bit back in this book for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, it's one of those things I think in real life, people that have been burnt really bad by people with addiction and hurt, and so I think they take that out in horror. But seeing the empathy of it because it is a struggle, and like I've seen people in my life who can get clean and they can stay that way for years, and then just something happens, and it's always like no, not again. But
Oh
it's such a
yeah.
struggle.
Yeah, it's a killer. And it's like it's never you never win.
Yeah,
The war is never over for people who have addictions and stuff. It's you just win the battle, which is every day. But man, you can have a bad day, and like you said, yeah, you lose one battle, and that
yeah,
just sucks to see it. So I feel like we need more empathy for people with addiction. So, and that's something that I feel like just, and I can only speak for, a Midwestern person in America, but I feel like there's just not enough. And it's just a
yeah.
stigma we've had for years and years and years, and we're just trying to break it slowly. I can see the progress, but we're still not there yet. The stigma still remains.
Yeah, we have this in America, this puritanical background, this puritanical reptile brain we can't get rid of in this country, where it's like it's not enough, that oh someone did wrong, we should help them. It's like no, they have to suffer first. We have to
Right.
punish them first. Like or if you it's like oh we could do this. Like seeing other countries, they're like oh if we make prison not awful, the recidivism rate is much lower. And like but we gotta hurt them. Like what do you mean you're not just hurting them? And it's hard to overcome that here. That's like buried
Right.
in
I,
us.
I I feel like we would do like public shaming if we still like
Yeah,
society accepted it still. Like we would 100% put people in the stocks and throw tomatoes at them and stuff.
yeah, yeah. It's
We would
it's
totally do that.
yeah, absolutely. And oh, also I love a year spent in horror where you do like every day 365 microfiction stories. Um,
Yeah, I thought that was a great like sort of. I don't think anyone's really done anything like I'm sure people have, but not to the extent where it's like, good Lord, how many? you
yeah,
know, so many stories, and it was so fun to put together. Really time consuming because I do it every day on Twitter because there's a hashtag on Twitter, VSS. What is it? VSS 365, which stands for very short story 365. So just every day, someone's like, here's the word, write a tweet long story based off that word. And so this was like a collection A Year Spent in Horror was a collection of those that I've been doing this for like 3 or 4 years over on Twitter, and
Dang.
it's so fun. I would recommend it to any of my author friends, you included, of course, like to just give it a shot for a few weeks, because it really helps, like, you kind of strengthen short fiction, because it's so small, and like to come up with a narrative in that many amount of words, you have to be so precise with them. There's no room for filler, and it just
Yeah.
really helps kind of strengthen that. So I
Yeah.
definitely recommend doing that.
Yeah, because yours
And
absolutely feels like they feel like a full story. Like they feel like there is a beginning, middle, end to these. There's like you know, there's so much with what you say and what you don't say.
yeah,
So
well, they better. Like I said, I spent 4 years doing them. If they're not good still, maybe it's time to give it up. But I really appreciate that, though. I never know too, with like which ones are gonna catch on with people and which ones won't. It's one of those funny things with social media, where you're like,
yeah,
when you think like this is it, this is the golden goose right here, and you send it out, and then just no one reacts to it, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I was wrong. And there's been so many times where I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of phoning this one in, this is not a great story, and then I hit post, and it blows up. People are like, this is fantastic. So I just never know. I have
yeah,
no idea what people are going to like, never.
yeah. Like Hungry Shadow Press does the Deadly Drabble Tuesday, which is a 100 word horror story,
Oh, there
like
you
from
go.
different authors every Tuesday. And I submitted it several times to it, and what always happens is I
Yep.
come down to two, and there's one that I'm like, oh, this is the better one. I send that one, and then like Brand Applegate be like, nah, and I send the other one. They're like, that's the one. Like I could never know. Like I should know my instinct is like, okay, do the opposite of my instinct. But
you gotta George Costanza. Do the
yeah,
exact opposite of what you normally would do.
yeah, and just have everything will fall into place.
Oh, I feel like I need to do that, because like it's so funny. I have like a TikTok too, and I got a TikTok so I could promote my books more. Um, and I hardly ever do it on there, but like the most viral video I have on TikTok, like by a wide mile, is me. I every year for like October, I do Spooktober and just watch one horror movie every day for the 31 days of October. And one of the days I just did a review on the Ginger Dead Man versus Evil Bong. And it's a terrible movie. And all I did was just say, I'm done with the Ginger Dead Man series. Thank God, I'm finished with it. And it blew up, and it mocks me because it does so well, because literally every day on TikTok, and I post every day on TikTok too, but every day on TikTok, I will get a like on that video. And I'm like, no, like my most recent video. What are you doing? Don't like that one. This
I've
is from
done other
like,
things.
yeah, it's like, I feel like a one-hit wonder. I feel like aha or something.
And I can't figure out TikTok because it is like, I'll try to come up with clever stuff to show my books off, and then I'll do like I did a post outside when I was cleaning my garden, and there were earwigs everywhere. And I was basically like, look at all these earwigs. It's like thousands of views and
Oh
shares. It's
man.
like I don't know what you people want.
It's that one is the most confusing. I do not know what people want on there. Like, I just do whatever I can. I post what I can. I'm mostly horror related, because horror is just such a huge part of my life. I would say
Yeah,
it's 90% of my life. Maybe too much of my life, but but I just post all the horror related content I can, and just hope that one day I'll live up to the Ginger Dead Man versus the Evil Bong again.
that sentence. One day, that should just be
One
your bio
day.
and everything. One day he will live up to.
Oh no.
So with the writing, trying to do like a micro story every single day. So are you a proponent of like try to do something every day? Like try to put down just even if it's just a few words, just do something daily.
Yeah, I'm a proponent of that, because I feel like if you it's so much easier when you have kind of a cycle or a rhythm, and your mind's just kind of in that place to keep doing it. And I feel more like I have to train myself too. Because there's been a few times where I've like, been like I can put off writing for a week or two, and then I go back to doing it, and I just hit a wall almost immediately. And then you're like, if you set a whole Saturday aside for it, I'll spend just 7 out of 8 hours worth of writing, just like staring off into space, going like, what's a synonym for stare? And just like trying to figure out what synonym to put somewhere or something just dumb like that, or go like, I don't like this sentence. Let me just delete it and then retype it 4 times. So I feel like I feel like every day if you do that, your mind's in the right place to go like, who cares about the synonym for stare? Just keep writing. So that's what I don't know, but what's your style more like? Are
I
you are you
think
for that?
I'm for that because like I know that it's easier for me to jump back into whatever work I'm doing if I'm doing it a little bit every day because like
Right.
I just my life's kind of hectic, so there'll be days that pass. Then all of a sudden it's like, you know, my wife's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take the kids out so you can have the day to write," and then I'm just like, I can't think of anything. Like I'm just like staring at the page, and it's like all the pressure of like, when am I gonna get another day like this? It's like
Right.
a little bit every day works better than going days without, and then all of a sudden like short circuiting your brain.
Right. And that's always the worst too, where you're like, you for some reason I know we do this. Writers do this where they put pressure. They're like, I have the time. I can do it unless the weight of the world just comes down on your shoulders.
Mhm.
And you're like, if I don't write enough today, I'm a failure, even though literally no one will say that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
it's
I
like I
put
would
that
never
one
say
as
that to another writer. I'd be like, "What are you talking about? That's crazy." But then on myself, I'm like, "You have
right.
failed. You failure. Like, go to a corner." Like,
Right. It's like, you didn't hit this arbitrary word mark. And it's wild to see people like other writers go like, oh, I only hit 5,000 words today. And I'm
I
just
know. I'm
like,
always like, it's like I'm happy for you, but I'm also angry. Like,
yeah, I
it's like that
could
scene in
never.
Hot Rod where that character's like, "I'm just jealous with rage right now. I'm so angry."
I could never reach that mark. Like in it, that's like a weekly mark for me, is like
Yeah,
hitting 5,000 words, like in a good week too. So I'm just like blown away. I'm like, how do you guys not release books like every other month at that pace?
and it's crazy. Some do, and I'm always amazed by that. Like,
That is
I've talked to authors on here that like, I try to do something, every 6 weeks or so, and I'm like, I'm in awe.
that is such an intense release schedule. Like every 6 weeks. I can't. That's how many books is that a year? That's like seven or something. My math might be way off,
Yeah,
but
it's a lot,
that's
but I also wonder if it's like the people that do that are the ones that just sit down every day, like, and really put in the words. But it's
right.
it's 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 hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, oh man. And it and like they're like thick books too, I'm sure. Like they're coming out with some 60,000
Mhm.
word books. And that's also tough for me. I don't know. Kudos to everyone who can do long fiction like consistently. I just cannot hit that
Yeah,
mark.
mine are always on the shorter side. I think I have one that's like it was a 60,000 mark. That's high strangeness, but most of mine are like novella length usually or short stories.
Yeah. Well,
Like
and but that's my
I can't
sweet
churn out the
spot.
bricks yet.
Right. That's my sweet spot to read though. I love a good like novella. So like Wendy Dalrymple, she always does like novellas and stuff, and she always does like fun bubblegum horror, and so it's like there's just no filler. It's just all action, and those are like I'm like this is great.
Yeah, it really is like it's a true escape. It's like, okay, this is just not gonna be like anything else I would pick up.
Yeah, it's just like a fun sort of like nice read to kind of take your mind off things for a while. And I love that kind of horror. And don't get me wrong, I love a good like a good horror that makes you feel, that makes you think, kind of like the last book I fully finished was Laurel Hightower's Day of the Door, and
Oh,
that's
I haven't read
like
that yet. Is it good? I mean, I know
Get
it is.
on
It's
it,
a little high
man.
tower.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, of course. But it's so damn good. Like I kind of had a reading slump for a while there. And I sat down and read it and was like, oh my gosh. So I now I'm back in it. I'm back into reading again just because of that book. It's so good. Like,
I love when
and
that happens. Like the thing that pulls you out of the reading slump.
yeah, and I really cannot. I'm not smart enough. I am not smart enough to articulate a writer's like style and how they like can like really put things in a certain way that's just so distinct. But Laurel's is so incredible how
Yeah.
she writes. And it's like I could probably identify her like blind, read this one page. We won't tell you what book it's from. I could probably identify it. And I just love the way she does it, the way she writes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's atmosphere. I feel like she always has like such a great atmosphere for her stories where you're just like, oh no, we're in trouble. Like something
Yeah.
bad things are ahead. Like it just kind of puts you at an uneasy state. And I love that. I love it so much.
Yeah. It's like a completely kind of in the atmosphere thing. It's like BioShock. Like you can feel the atmosphere of that game like
Yeah.
immediately. And that's how Laurel's books feel. Just immediately. It's like, oh, okay. And the Day of the Door really starts off with a doozy too. Like for that sort of prologue. I'm like, oh, all right, that is how you start a book. Oh my goodness.
All right, we're in it. Um,
Yeah, just pow right into it. And I'm like, hey, I'm here for it.
oh, one thing I noticed was, and I in my last interview with Bob Ford, I was talking about this. You mentioned like growing up in Kansas, and you're talking about like the barren plains of Kansas, and um, I've talked to so many horror authors where I feel like I grew up in the middle of nowhere is a key origin story for becoming a writer, becoming a storyteller. It's just like there was nothing but wilderness and nothing around me.
I, it's so funny because those other authors, I'm sure they actually, and you too, I'm sure actually grew up in like small towns and stuff. But like, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, which is the most populous city in Kansas. But it just somehow it still feels like there's just nothing here.
Yeah,
It feels like a small town somehow. And it's so funny. Wichita, it's if you know five people, like five high profile people, 50% of the city somehow. It's the biggest small town ever. And every day I'll go like, oh, this person? Well, I know them from this, and this person too. Wow, that's wild. And it happens every day. But but when I feel like when I was 9 or 10, my parents moved us to like a suburb of Wichita, and that was out in the boonies. So that definitely felt like there's nothing here.
well, like
You know,
driving through Kansas, it really is just like when you see like nothing. It's like, oh, this is what they meant by prairie madness. That just like there's nothing
yeah,
out here, and I will lose my mind now.
yeah, it is. There's just nothing. It's so funny too. I know there's like this. I don't know how big the push is, but the push is like, let's get a national park instituted in Kansas, and they want it to be the Flint Hills. And like hills is kind of a stretch. They are hills, but
Like
they're
technically,
they're Kansas hills, so they are very small. Like I feel like someone like from Colorado or like a state with actual elevation would drive through just straight through them and go, okay, so where are they? And go like, well, that was them. That was it. You passed them. But it
yeah,
is you can just like in Kansas, you could step out as soon as like if you get to a suburb, you can step outside and just see for like 20 miles because it's just flat across the way. And
it's
it
just
so many things could come across that. So many horrible things could come across that 20-mile span. So it really helps with with the process of going like, what creepy thing is lurking out? And like there's so much wildlife still too. Uh like because again, even though Wichita is such, is the most populated city in Kansas, where I live in it, and I live basically on one side of it, but like really in the heart of Wichita. We had a fox yelping in our backyard at like 4 in the morning the other night. And this is something I did not know, but foxes can sound like a grown human struggling to breathe with their yelps. And that was terrifying to wake up to. So I'm sure I got a story idea in there somewhere.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny, like the animals that were custom. Like I live in town, like it's a suburb really, but I live in town in Oklahoma. But like, this morning there was a deer and her fawn just like in our front yard, just chilling. And I remember I lived in Dallas for a while, and I didn't live like in the outskirts. I lived in Dallas, and like I go out of my car to go home one day to my apartment, and like there's just a coyote standing in the parking lot. I was like, "Hey," I told him I was like, "There's a coyote," and he just like looked at wasn't scared or anything because he's used to like the urban environment, so people don't scare him. So he's just kind of watching
Right.
us go inside our house. It's like, okay, don't let the dog. Be careful, we walk the dog later.
Right. It's just so wild. Like in the in those states where it's like, yeah, once you get out of these urban areas, it's just flat. There's nothing here. It's
Yeah,
it's wildlife, and it's just so wild to see those animals still going like, this is all right in the city environment.
yeah, we've adjusted. We can eat pets. Like,
Yeah, they're just wandering around like, whatever. They're just not frightened in any way. Like we have a plethora of rabbits like in our backyard, which we don't want those, but we're not going to do anything about them. And I feel
yeah,
like they just know because they do not run. These are like the first rabbits I've ever seen that aren't skittish. They just do their thing. Like I'll come home from work. I'll go out in the backyard and like stare at them like, are you gonna run off or something? And they just like in defiance, they just sit there and eat grass. And I'm like, whatever.
you're gonna come home one day and they're just in the house, and like, we have taken this. This is
this,
ours now.
is
You
this
work
is
for
our
us.
domain. We found the title to the home. It's ours now. Maybe. I mean, more of them keep showing up. I feel like this is also a horror movie waiting to happen.
I think the closest to feeling like a horror movie with animals was one time my mom, she lived way out in the country. When I lived kind of closer to her, she called me. She's like, "There's a copperhead in the yard. You come get it and get it out of the yard." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah." And so I go, I see it, and I go to get it into a bucket. And then like I turn around, there's another one. I turn around, there's another
Oh,
one.
jeez.
And there's like 6 or 7 of them all around my feet. And it was like cicadas had hatched, so they're all coming out to eat cicadas. So it's just one of those like it's like there's too many of them.
That is horrifying. I don't even. What did you do like to get out of that situation?
I was like just stepping slowly backwards towards the porch because like usually they just kind of like, if you're not an immediate threat, they just like lay perfectly still. And so I
Oh,
just
okay.
like got back up into the house and it's like, yeah, we're just gonna they'll be gone in the morning. Just leave those be.
I don't think there's anything we can do here.
Yeah, this is their yard now.
This is their.
Let them eat their cicadas and move on.
We are not at the top of the food chain anymore.
Um, yeah, I still think it's revenge because when we got them, it was like my grandmother used to live next to us, and like she was the first one to say we have copperheads, and they used to not be in the area, I guess, because her brother, my great uncle who lived on the other side of us, was telling her like, "We you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what snakes are. We don't have copperheads out here." So she spent an entire summer killing everyone she found and filling a laundry detergent box with them, and then she wrapped it, took it to his house, and knocked on the door, left it on the porch, and went home. And he called him later, was like, "Did you get my package?" Like, so
That that's one way to prove a point. That is a long con of proving a point.
she did stuff like that. I came over once and she caught a live copperhead and there was a black widow in the jar with it. And I was like, "What's going on?" She goes, "I'm just gonna see who makes it." she, she's like, "For the record, this spider made it. The spider beat the snake." So
Oh, interesting. I see. I would have thought it would have been the other way around, but
yeah, no, it that black widow gorged itself on the snake so much that it looked almost gray because its skin had stretched so much because it ate so much of
oh
the snake.
wow. It had a feast for the ages.
Yeah, and then she got bit by a brown recluse, and there's a whole thing of like it'd be different spiders in jars of brown recluses, and she'd be like, "I'm going to find their natural enemy." It's like, okay, like let me know how that works
Oh.
out.
She was a scientist of sorts.
Mhm.
That's wild. I don't think my grandparents ever did anything like that. Uh, my grandpa, he still does it too. Well, I guess he doesn't anymore because he doesn't have a garden, but he lives in a suburb of a little bit further out too from Wichita, and like he would go around town after like harvesting a bunch of like tomatoes from his garden because he couldn't eat them all. So he'd go around and like check people's cars in this downtown suburb. And if they were unlocked, he'd just leave a tomato in their car and then just go about his business. But he did that for like 4 or 5 summers, just leaving tomatoes in people's cars.
I hope so. I took it as like a mob, like somebody sending us a message. We don't know what it
Like
is.
I don't know what I would do if I got in my car like multiple days in a row and found found a tomato. I'd go like, what do you want? What does this mean?
I love like his minor action, and he's lived rent free in who knows how many people's heads for who knows how many years.
Right. That someone's like, who is the tomato bandit? Who's doing this?
There you go. There's something you go and work that into something. I'm sure. Like, there's at least a microfiction story there.
Right. I imagine someone goes home and they're like, babe, what did you do? Who did you piss off? I've been getting 6 tomatoes in my car this week. Someone's not happy.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. This has been
Yeah,
an
thanks for
awesome talk.
having me.
Yeah.
Oh
Um,
man.
and again, everyone, a year spent in horror, you can see that, like, just what microfiction can accomplish, what people can do in 100 words, and um, Drowning in the Drink comes out next week, right?
Yeah.
And
So
that is that's a great. It's about horror. It's about addiction. I don't want to give too much away because there's so much I like about where that story goes, and I think you just need to stumble on it as you're reading it. But I highly recommend it.
well,
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. No problem. All right. Well, maybe we'll talk again on here.
Oh, I'd love to.